If you're selling a home in Oakwood, Ohio, the city's actually going to inspect your home before you can close. Not the buyer's inspector, the city inspector. And if they find a violation, it can delay your closing or cancel your closing altogether. And a lot of sellers in Oakwood actually are completely unaware of this. And we're going to talk about that today. Hi, I'm David Moyer with Keller Williams Advisors in Dayton, Ohio, and I sell Oakwood homes. And 9 times out of 10, this is the one hurdle that a lot of my Oakwood sellers actually have no idea about until it's too late, or at least until I walk through their front door and lay this all out for them. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what the Oakwood presale inspection is, the top 5 things that trip up most sellers, about how much that actually costs to fix, and how to time that so it doesn't actually trip up your home sale or your closing. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about what happens if the inspector wants to come into your house and you really don't want them to, because there's actually a court case in 2018 that overturned some of the regulations here in Oakwood, and we're going to talk about that. That's also something a lot of residents here in Oakwood are completely unaware about, so that's a really helpful tip, even if you know about the Oakwood pre-sale inspections. By the way, do you recognize this house behind me? That's Hawthorne Hill. That's the homestead of Orville Wright. He is the founder of aviation. I highly doubt Oakwood has done a pre-sale inspection on this house. What do you think? But first, let's actually talk about what this inspection is, because a lot of my sellers actually confuse this city inspection with the buyer's whole house inspection they do when you go under contract. So let's talk about the differences right off the bat. This is actually a city ordinance that's put in place by the city of Oakwood that prohibits you from actually transferring an equitable sale of your property until it meets the standardized criteria that the city has in their zoning commission for your property. So in order for you to sell your property, it actually has to meet the minimum standards of what the zoning commission says the home has to be. This is a great thing actually in terms of maintaining the standards that Oakwood has set forth in their residential zoning committees. And like I said before, if you're selling your property, which in this case you would be, this is not your buyer's whole house inspection. That's your buyer's responsibility, and that's part of their transaction when they're purchasing your home. That's ordered by the buyer, that's paid for by the buyer, and focused on the things that just the buyer actually cares about. The Oakwood inspection is the city's check against Chapter 17 of its own zoning and property maintenance codes, and it actually results in either a certificate of occupancy or a notice of violation. So in order to get this, the fee is actually right around $70, and you pay that when you actually submit your application to the office, which is located at 30 Park Avenue in Oakwood. You can also email them to zoning@oakwood.ohio.gov. I'll have all this information below in the contents and in the description of this video for further information. Now, if you've never heard of this before, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. How is this actually legal? Especially if you're coming from out of the state. And here's a fun fact or a legal fact for you in just under 30 seconds. Actually, back in 2018, a federal court actually struck down the original version of this ordinance, ruling that it actually violated the Fourth Amendment because homeowners could actually be forced to accept warrantless searches of their home. That's absolutely right. They were being forced to accept these warrantless searches. So Oakwood actually amended the ordinance to require either consent or administrative warrant for interior inspections. Therefore, the program still is in effect, but sellers now have much clearer rights when it comes to the city inspector coming through your house on the exterior as well as the interior. You can actually check that out. You can Google it online, go to the 2018 federal court ruling covered. It was also covered in the Dayton Daily News and in the 1851 Center for Constitutional Law. I'll include the link down here below as well. Okay, so now you're thinking, David, why does Oakwood have this and almost no other Dayton city actually does? Oakwood has been actively maintaining its housing stock through code enforcement for decades. The presale inspection actually is part of why Oakwood homes have held their value so well year after year, decade after decade. Okay, so what's next? Here's the part that actually matters if you're actually selling, whether this year, next year, or 10 years down the road. Here's actually what the inspector looks for and what the inspection looks like. Number one is going to be the big one, and this is the one I see time and time again that homeowners have to actually get taken care of prior to closing, and that is going to be exterior trim, exterior paint. So when the inspector comes to your home, they're going to look for peeling paint on the siding, the trim, the window frames, the front porch columns, garage doors. Oakwood is full of lots of wood siding, older homes, and a lot of stylistic character homes. So what fails is if you have a south-facing home, west-facing elevations that take in a lot of UV light, window frames, front porch posts, and the unusual culprits in the, like I said, these older Oakwood homes, that can be a culprit that you want to plan ahead for. So a lot of times if someone comes out to repair this, it could be somewhere along the lines of $300 to $800 for someone to come out, a handyman, a small paint job, or maybe it's something you can actually do yourself. But keep in mind, if you want to do it right and do it right the first time, always hire a professional so that you're not delaying your actual closing. Sometimes if it's not isolated and you're looking at a large job, it could be upwards of $3,500 to $8,000 depending on the size of your home if you actually have to have the entire home repainted. So it depends on the size of your home. Always verify this with your local painters and with your contractors and of course with your real estate agent as to what you should do prior to putting your home onto the market so you're not chasing the ball. So if you look into what it has to be done in terms of paint, this is the very first thing I always take a look at before your Oakwood home goes onto the market. Next thing you're going to look for is, you could probably guess it, roof and gutters. They're going to look for missing or cupped shingles, sagging or detached gutters. They're going to look for blocked downspouts or damaged fascia. And what fails? Usually in these older Oakwood homes, you're looking at roofs that are 20 plus years old, often showing a lot of edge curling, gutters that are pulling away from the edge of those homes, and freeze-thaw cycles that are happening over and over again, especially in this part of Ohio where we have extreme heat and extreme colds. So the average little shingle here and there could cost $200, $500. It could be $400 to $1,500 for a small roof repair. But if you're looking at a complete roof replacement, it could be on the low end around $8,000 all the way up to $18,000 or more, depending on the architectural digest and the way your home is actually designed. So if you're looking at, is this a DIY project or is this a contractor project that I should hire out? Contractor, 100%. Next up is going to be those driveways, those walkways, and those sidewalks. So the inspector is actually going to look for things that are cracked in the concrete that are a trip hazard. If there's loose brick and you have a paver patio, those are really common here in Oakwood, or if you have broken or missing porch railings or anything like that. Now keep in mind, let's take a trip back here. If you're also selling a home and you're financing FHA or VA, those porch railings also will come in important. So what also fails is you have tree roots that are really heavy, and if they're pushing up on those bricks, that's also going to make a difference when the inspector comes out. It's not a 100% of the time they're going to flag it, but it is something you want to be aware of and potentially be prepared to take care of if the inspector does flag it. That can be $150 to $500 to treat just a small section, or upwards of $2,500 or more for a new portion of a driveway. So always verify that with somebody before you go into the sale. If you think there's going to be an area of concern, is that a DIY project or a contractor? Once again, contractor. Now this one lends itself to the very first one we talked about, but also fence, sheds, and also outdoor accessories. So the inspector is going to look for things that are like leaning, rotting fencing, collapsed fencing, or maybe even sheds or anything that are unpermitted. Now in Oakwood, we don't see a lot of sheds because the lots are a little bit smaller, but we do see a lot of detached garages that are used as sheds or storage. So those also have peeling paint and some rotting trim. What fails? Privacy fences that are installed 15 years ago that haven't been properly maintained and are rotting, that are starting to lean, or sheds or detached garages that were not set back in the proper amount, or they haven't been maintained, or they have roofing issues. That, once again, could be a small minor repair. It could also cost thousands of dollars. Always take a look at that. Be prepared. If the home needs painting, there's a good chance the garage or the exterior building also needs some painting. Is that DIY or contractor? Depending on the size of the job, make sure you get an estimate in advance. And the last one that the inspector is going to look at, and this is going to be a more minor thing, is going to be some of the yard and landscaping items. This is going to be things like overgrown grass, and trust me, in Oakwood, they're going to keep track of that. If you don't keep your lawns maintained at a decent level, Oakwood's going to give you some sort of notice to maintain your lawn. Large weeds that are overgrown in your home, dead shrubs, fallen tree limbs, if you're not maintaining those, Oakwood's going to have you take care of them. If you're selling your house and there are fallen tree limbs, Oakwood's going to tell you to take care of that. And if you have a dead tree on your lot, before you transfer that, they're going to tell you to take care of that prior to that transfer. So what fails? If you have an absentee owner, or if it's an estate sale property, or a spring inspection is right after winter time or anything like that, that could be something you really want to pay attention to. That can be a minor thing, $100 here, $400 there, but if you're looking at a dead tree removal, that can be upwards of $800, $2,000, even $4,000. So if you have something, or you're concerned about it, or you think it's going to be an issue, it might be a good idea to even call the city to say, is this going to be an issue moving forward? I'm just not sure. Now here's a pro tip that a lot of people actually don't do, and they'll take it for granted, and I'm more than happy to do it with you. Grab a clipboard, and about a month out before you're even thinking about maybe listing, or maybe a month out before you're even thinking about having me come out there, walk around the exterior of your house. Take that clipboard with you. 2 months even, before you are even thinking about making that move. Start on the south side of your home. Take photos of every single elevation of the property. That 1 hour that you spend outside could potentially save you a 30-day delay if there are issues with your house. Now, what happens if you get a violation on your home and you're already under contract? Because that's the one situation that I actually see that'll cost sellers some serious money. And here's the bottom line. If you have a violation on your property and you're already under contract, then the most important thing you can possibly do is get those items taken care of right away and not try and fight the city. Now, the clients I work with in Oakwood, we've already gone through every single point in that house. We've anticipated anything the city could possibly come after them for if there are any code violations, and we've been proactive to remedy those just to make sure that the city doesn't have an issue. Or if we see something that maybe is a potential issue, we have lined up a contractor with an estimate so we are prepared that if it does become an issue, my client is ready to pull the trigger and get that taken care of so there's no delay. So there's no loss in finances there's no loss in time, and the transaction continues to move smoothly. What happens is if I have a buyer in Oakwood and that seller is unprepared and we come across something and that seller is getting that pre-sale inspection, remember that pre-sale inspection for the city is the seller's responsibility. And if they find something, it is then upon the seller to get that taken care of, and I don't have a whole lot of control upon that. And if that seller isn't ready, now I have to look at potentially delaying my loan. It could cost my buyer money to extend their loan. It could cost them money to extend their living quarters if they're relocating here from outside of the state. There's a whole slew of things that could happen. So being prepared in advance is going to save you a ton of money. You can actually go to Oakwood and say, I'm looking to sell my home. Can I actually go ahead and do this now so that we can get this out of the way before I put my home onto the market? And Oakwood will be more than happy to offer you guidance, or at least give you some sort of quick preliminary walkthrough so you know what you have ahead of you. Now, this is my favorite part of everything, and these are the questions that I get more often than not from people that are looking to sell their homes in Oakwood, or they're buying a home, and I'm telling them all about this before they ever purchase a home in Oakwood for the first time. And the first question, and the biggest question I always get is, can I refuse to let the inspector inside my house? Now, if you recall at the top of this video, back in 2018, there was a ruling on this, and the answer, quite frankly, is yes. Legally, you can. After the 2018 court ruling, Oakwood amended their ordinance to require either your consent or an administrative warrant before they can actually enter your home. So in practice, most sellers consent because the interior checks are just fairly routine. They're more around like smoke detectors and basic safety items. They're not really looking at the minor or the small details, right? And refusing that can actually create a lot of friction with the city and with your buyer. But you do have the right to require a warrant. And if there's a reason you want to do that, you actually have the right to do that, and you should know that you actually have the option. So if you're considering doing that, like I said, refer back to the 2018 ruling, maybe actually contact a real estate attorney. But if you're looking for a smooth transaction, if you're close to the closing date and you don't want to cause any interference with your buyer, my suggestion would probably be let the inspector in. Second question. What if the inspector finds something that I just can't fix before closing? What if the inspector finds something that my contractor is way out, or what if I can't afford it, or what if I just don't have the time or the resources, or I have already negotiated everything I can with my buyer? And the answer is Oakwood can actually issue what's called a conditional certificate of occupancy, which allows the actual transfer to proceed with the violation actually disclosed in writing to the buyer. And then as the buyer signs the receipt acknowledging that there's a violation on the property, but the buyer has the right to walk away from that transaction. So it does supersede what the buyer can do. In practice, this only works if the item is minor or if you offer it as like a credit. It almost is always cheaper just to fix it up before you actually list the property. So if it's something along the lines of maybe you have to have the garage painted and it's the middle of winter and you just can't get it done because the temperature is 5 degrees below. So you could have an estimate done and say, I will have this done in March, April, or May when it gets a little bit above freezing and I have a painter that can do that. Here's the estimate. Here's how much it's going to cost. I'm going to get this taken care of. The city said that's fine. The buyer signs it off with the city and says, I agree to accept this, and they will move forward with that. How many times has a realtor heard a story from somebody? My neighbor said this, oh, my neighbor said that. And this is the question number 3. My neighbor sold without an inspection a few years ago, so I don't really think this Oakwood thing is really enforced. Yeah, it is. It's actually enforced. It's actually built into the title transfer process. So title companies and attorneys in the Miami Valley, they know this ordinance. They know it by heart, and they know exactly what to do when they see an Oakwood property come across their table, and they know that they have to see that certificate of occupancy before all parties are at closing. So if they don't have that occupancy and the Oakwood transfer prior to closing, without it, they just can't do it. If your neighbor actually dodged it somehow, then they actually just got lucky and they left themselves exposed to future legal actions. And don't plan on your sale around that. I wouldn't plan on that. I wouldn't plan on also getting lucky around that simple assumption. And if that's your plan moving forward with the sale, I don't think I can take part in that. And this one should seem obvious, but of course this does it. Now this one should seem obvious, but does this also apply to vacant or estate sales? Yes, of course. Ownership transfer is across the board. Ownership transferring is ownership transferring. It applies to estates, for sale by owners, vacant sales, property transfers. It's all required regardless of what it is. As long as it's in the jurisdiction of Oakwood, you have to go through this process hands down. Now, here's what to do next now that you have all this information. If you're thinking about selling your Oakwood home in 2026, 2027, or any time in the future, do these 2 things next week. First, like I said before, walk around the exterior with that clipboard and take those photos. Second, give me a call, text me, or email me, and I'll do a free pre-inspection walk of your home. No pressure, no obligation, and I'll let you know exactly what you should probably consider fixing before the city inspector ever shows up. So, all you have to do is give me a call, 937-477-2298. You can find me on my website, just davidmoyer.com. You can also email me at davidmoyer@kw.com. I manage all those myself, so if you reach out to me, I'm going to be the one getting back to you. I have different topics every single week, so if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to my channel, now is a great time to do that. Ring that bell. Share this with somebody else who's either moving to Oakwood, considering moving to Oakwood, Ohio, or is living in Oakwood now and considering selling in the future, and this is their first time selling in Oakwood. So every Oakwood seller runs into this inspection, and now that you've watched this video, you're not going to be caught off guard. Congratulations.